on a random.
Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, the Lox and Dipset get ready to face off in a versus in August. My thoughts on Pop Smoke's latest posthumous album, Faith. T-Pain goes off about rappers sounding the same and remembering the diabolical BIZ MARKIE. Let's do it.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone. Permanent Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip hop, news, and culture, including my perspective on it all. Big, super big shout out to the producers of this podcast over at patreon.com/hiphop Appreciate you for the support. If you would like to become a member, meaning you who is not supporting right now, become a member. Go over to patreon.com/hiphopnow. Take a look at the different tiers. You get bonus episodes. You get to literally produce this podcast. It's just not a catchy term or name for people over at Patreon. These people are providing support monthly, right, at different tier levels, and sometimes one-time donations to the podcast. And what does that do? It doesn't pay for my house. I pay for that. I have a job. Remember those? But what it does is their support has helped me to add more to this podcast in a lot of different ways, a lot of different things I wasn't doing. For instance, if you're watching the video version, you see there's like a little mic, protection here that originally I didn't have. I had the mic. I didn't have this. This makes it so, we can do a better job with the sound quality on the production side of this podcast. Also, that their support has gone to me advertising via Instagram and Facebook. So if you follow Hip Hop Now podcast on either one of those, or Vegas World INC, I should say, maybe a couple of times you've seen a sponsored ad for Hip Hop Now podcast come across your timeline. Things like that are all due in part to the support of people who have been listening to this podcast for however long and felt the need to support, and it can get better and better and better, because obviously YouTube and podcasting is not something I do full time, as I've said on this show, but there are ways to improve this podcast if you, the listener, and now the viewer, would like to see some of that stuff. So again, you have input on the podcast in so many different ways. Visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, not Ambrosia for Heads. I'm so used to saying that I just said it out of nowhere. XXL magazine.com, djbooth.net, and a couple of places where I'm getting these stories from, like rollingstones.com or rollingstone.com. I'm recording this on a Friday the 16th, and it has officially been reported that BIZ MARKIE, one of the pioneers in hip hop, also known as the Clown Prince of hip hop, unfortunately passed away at the age of 57. He'd been battling a decade-long, just back and forth with type 2 diabetes. It was announced via a rep on behalf of his family that he passed away. And there were at least twice there was situations where people were saying rest in peace to Biz Markie, including myself. I think the second time I thought it went down, but the family said no, he's still alive. No, just pray for him. And unfortunately, now it's for real. So real quick, I'm going to read the statement. Biz Markie was 57, by the way, if I didn't already say that, but this is a statement from the family, and I quote, "It is with profound sadness that we announce this evening, with his wife Tara by his side, hip-hop pioneer Biz Markie peacefully passed away. We are grateful for the many calls and prayers of support that we have received during this difficult time. Biz created a legacy of artistry that will forever be celebrated by his industry peers and his beloved fans whose lives he was able to touch through music spanning over 35 years. He leaves behind a wife, many family members, and close friends who will miss his vibrant personality, constant jokes, and frequent banter. We respectfully request privacy for his family as they mourn their loved one." So, like we do about this time, we're going to give a quick rest in peace to Biz Markie in a moment of silence. Rest in peace, Biz. Real quick, let's talk about Biz Markie and that legacy, since this is a hip hop podcast and this is just what we do, man. Again, like mentioned in the article, Biz was considered to be the clown prince of hip hop. And what they meant by, giving him that term is, if you don't know, Biz Markie's rhyming style, lyrical content was mostly jokes. Now, of course, the old heads like myself, we lived through it. We already know the types of songs that come to mind. But if you are younger and you think, you're like, oh, I think I heard of Biz Markie or whatever, or maybe you came across Biz Markie as a DJ. Biz Markie's early hits, early albums included raps about picking boogers. Yep, you heard that right. Raps about doing what you do on the toilet. It's a family podcast, so I ain't gonna really say it like that, but you know what I'm talking about. And just all kinds of humorous bars, lines, videos, everything. You know what I'm saying? He also got away, and to this day, because it was dope, right? We liked it, but to this day, I don't think he gets enough props for straight up singing on a record. And Biz could not sing whatsoever, but having a hit in songs like Just a Friend, it was a huge hit. And it was like his singing was so bad, it was good, right? And it was almost like something only he could do, and it was dope. Um, he definitely, in my opinion, has a classic album, What the Biz is Going Off. And he has a number of classic records, from the Vapors to collaborations with, Big Daddy Kane, Roxanne Shante, Master Ace, the whole Juice Crew. You know what I'm saying? In a lot of ways, songs like Erase Racism. The dope part about Biz is when his hip hop career, his solo career started to fade, he reinvented himself as a DJ and he got a lot of work. Now, I used to live down in the DMV. If you don't know, that's like Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. But mostly I lived in Baltimore and, partied in DC and stuff like that. And frequently, I'd be at a party and they like, DJ by Biz Markie. And I used to be like, what? The Biz is DJing? The last time I saw Biz Markie was actually in 2019 on the day of my wedding anniversary, which is 420, April 20th. I'm not a weed head, so that we didn't even think about that when we got married, not at all. But the last time I saw Biz was on my anniversary, right? 2019 at the National Cannabis Festival down in Washington, D.C. He DJ'd that festival. Action Bronson rapped. He was rapped. Look at me. Uh, Action Bronson was down there and Ludacris. And Biz was DJing and it was dope, right? And Biz DJing style to me, at least what I remember from that festival, was kind of like throwback park jam DJing, right? For one, you don't need an MC because Biz is DJing, right? So he know how to get the party going. But also he would spin the records in a way that was reminiscent of back in the days, even though every record he played wasn't, something from the 80s or anything like that. But it was the way he spin the records, right? It wasn't about a bunch of scratching and all of that. It was really about moving the crowd, engaging the crowd. The crowd was moving in slow motion, as you can believe, right? Because it was basically a 420 festival and the National Cannabis Festival. But it was good, you know what I'm saying, to be out there, to see a couple of hip hop acts and see, Biz Markie, a legend in the hip hop game, a pioneer that made it so that every MC didn't have to be this lyrical god, telling people that you can actually have fun with hip hop. It's actually just as good as a really good conscious record, a really good gangster record. It's not about, obviously we all have our tastes, so the content will depend on, who you are. But at the end of the day, I mean, the content was funny and it was all alternative. And, that's how I always look at hip hop, in the same way I look at movies, video games, and books, right? If you're going to buy a good book, you kind of know what type of book. Some people like only one type of book, right? You might just read Tom Clancy books, so you might just read, who, Elon Harris. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? But it's like different genres in hip hop, and Biz Markie's genre was definitely on the comedy side. But do not sleep. There was a lot of dope beats, his flows, and lastly, one of the best cats to beatbox in hip hop history. You know what I'm saying? Beatboxing was an art form, considered an instrument, and he had hit records like Make the Music with Your Mouth Biz, and was well known to be paired with Roxanne Shante because his beatboxing skills was crazy. So I said all of that to say that Biz Markie is definitely a legend, a pioneer in the hip hop game, a successful hip hop artist, whether that's on the commercial side or on the street side. And he deserved his flowers while he was still here. A lot of us gave that to him, but he also deserves to be remembered going forward. So definitely, hopefully his family can benefit from streams, because I know that's what people tend to do. They tend to go stream, they tend to go buy stuff, they tend to go watch videos. But if you see anything where you know that the proceeds of playing this music or whatever it may be is going to his family, try to run it up, man. Show his family some love by showing them how much you honored their family member. You know what I'm saying? So rest in peace to Biz Markie. In other news, Pop Smoke's latest posthumous album was released this Friday. If you're from the future, you know what to do. You need to get your ass out of here, to be honest. And this is the second album put out by Pop Smoke's peoples or his estate, right? Since his passing. And well, we're going to get into it, right? It's about 17 to 20 tracks long, but yet it's still an hour. This new album entitled Faith is actually a follow-up to his first posthumous album from 2020. Imagine that, during the pandemic. I almost forgot we've been in the pandemic so long. But that was called Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon. And it was executive produced by 50 Cent. I don't think this album Faith is. Yeah, I don't think it is. Now, let me just make it clear. Let me make it a little bit clear for y'all, right? Let me get the songs together. Let me get the track list together. Actually, let me get the track list together for real, because there are a lot of features on here. So let me tell y'all real quick about me as a hip hop fan as it relates to Pop Smoke's music. Early on, I really didn't think he was anything special, right? I wasn't looking for bars. I knew it was drill rap, so my expectations were set appropriately. But I felt like, when he started dropping music early on, like his Wu mixtapes, I was kind of like, I didn't really see what the buzz was about. And I didn't do no deep dive because, again, to me, this isn't the type of music that should take long for you to decide whether you like it or not. And I remember hearing, a couple of songs that I forget what song it was, but basically I heard a song and I was in an environment, right, where I was, having a couple of drinks, and I'm not talking about during the pandemic, but I was like, yo, I kind of like this record. And I remember this person saying, yo, this Pop Smoke. And I was like, wow, maybe I really need to like lower my expectations, not in a disrespectful way, right? And just see what it is. And like I mentioned with BIZ Markie, some rappers just have a vibe, right? You're really not listening for bars. You're not listening to learn anything. You're not trying to be wild by the wordplay. It's just a vibe, right? I feel like Rick Ross is a vibe. You know what I'm saying? So once this album that was executive produced by 50 Cent dropped in 2020, I was like, I'm going to listen to that with fresh ears. And I really liked it. And I played it a lot during that summer. And for me, the vibe is a combination of the bass in the tracks and the bass in his voice. What he has to say is typically the same stuff, but at the end of the day, when it's just a vibe, every song is like 3 minute long, 2 minute long hooks. That's just what it is. Uh, this latest release, Faith, which has 20 tracks on it, is loaded with features. Now that release in 2020, what I'm saying, Shoot for the Moon, definitely had a couple of features on it, but all of that is to be expected, right? The brother passed away. He didn't have a ton of completed albums. He had verses here and there scattered around. So they're basically putting together projects around what he already contained. Now, Shoot for the Moon was more of Pop Smoke working on this album than this is. This is more of what we typically get when somebody passes away and the label creates a posthumous album, right? So there are a lot of features on here. Kanye West and Pusha T's on here, Rick Ross and The Dream, 21 Savage, 42 Doug. Pusha T's on here twice. Takeoff of Migos. Future's on here. Chris Brown's on here. Pharrell Williams, Kid Cudi, and the list goes on and on and on and on. My thoughts on this project is that it's not as good as Shoot for the Moon, in my opinion, but it is not bad to me. Now, I say that now, it just dropped, right? I listened to it probably twice so far. It's easy to say that now because it's new, right? And it's summertime and we outside and we ain't got masks on. So when it's vibe music, everything sounds good. Like, you ever went to Miami and you feel like everything is techno and flow rider, but you don't care because you like, it's Miami. It sounds good. I'm supposed to put shades on and let the taco meat flow. That's chest hairs for those who don't know. But you know what I'm saying? Like, some things are just a vibe. So I'll say this to hip hop fans, especially the hip hop fans that listen to my podcast, because they tend to not be drill and trap rapper fans. But I'm more of a open-minded hip hop fan. I feel like with all I said about Pop Smoke and his music, and this album in particular, you might like it. If you are a hard to the hardcore underground boom bap specific sound rapper, this is not for you. I don't care that I said to push your T's on here. I don't even know if you would survive that song to hear his verse. But all in all, I feel like it's a decent project, but I saw some people online were mad at the features. But how can you be mad at the features? Like, what do you expect? He just didn't have enough to me. And when you think about it, right? Okay, let's say you make the album shorter and you take off some of the features and you put some of those verses together. Well, the subject matter, it might not match up, right? Because he may be talking about one specific thing on 2 bars and one verse may be halfway done. Like, y'all don't get it sometimes. Sometimes, you know, the music isn't complete. And I mean, even whole verses aren't complete. Sometimes cats will lay down half a verse and say, I'll come back to it later. It just is what it is, man. In other news, right? So T-Pain, I forget this. I don't know if this was a podcast or whatever it was, but he was on Twitch. And there's this clip of T-Pain talking about how so many rappers sound the same today. And he was mainly talking about rappers that do trap and drill, right? And he was getting really excited. Not in a good way because it's funny to watch, but not in a good way because he was being serious. He was a little upset about it. But his point was the fact that rappers and their music sound the same, right? He said, and this would have made me think that rappers are trying to get signed with him, and they're like, "Yo, here's my tape, here's my link to my album on SoundCloud, and here's my name, little window shade." And to T-Pain, he's like, "We already got 100 Lils. We already got Lil Uzi Vert. We got Lil Baby. We got Dub Baby. We got enough babies, right? In this in this hip hop game, we got enough of a lot of the same thing." And he just wants rappers to make something original. Now, listeners to this podcast and boom bap heads across the nation and the world know that we have been saying this and singing this song in particular, since we're talking about T-Pain, for such a long time. A really, 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 really long time. And it's kind of frustrating. Let me tell you a quick story as it relates to this whole topic, right? T-Pain, you can listen to it. Why don't you? Hit subscribe, T-Pain. But this is the thing. I watched the Hulu documentary, curated and kind of put together by Questlove and crew. When I say crew, I don't mean the Roots. Whatever team worked with him to put together this documentary on Hulu called Summer of Soul. The documentary is like 2 hours long. I watched it, and the thing that struck me the most while I was watching it, and especially once it was over, was obviously the sea of black folk, beautiful black people, right? But the talented artists that did their thing during this summer long festival in, I think, 1969. And the documentary starts with a young Stevie Wonder. Now, if you don't know, Stevie Wonder is blind. I hope you know. But if you don't know, he is, right? And I watched this man not only play the piano blind, which we've all seen him do, right? But also play the drums, which I've rarely seen. But also stand up on a chair and jump off a chair and sing. It was really amazing. And he wasn't the only one to perform. And by the end of this documentary, I was like, wow, musicians today should be somewhat ashamed because every time you turn around, right, whether it's the fans or the musicians or the artists themselves, they try to qualify their greatness in this moment by comparing themselves to other greats. But like I know, they're not doing half the work. Because one thing about watching Summer of Soul, every group, every artist, every voice was original. They were touching different genres of music, history of African Americans and Africa all on one stage. You know what I'm saying? People coming from all over the place. It took place in Harlem, but as far as performers, they were from all over the place. And when you look at music now, and obviously it's not everybody, artists, rappers and R&B artists are shameful in the way they just copy each other. Like it's almost the thing you're supposed to do. It's almost there was a time, here we go with the old heads up. There was a time uh there was a time where you had to be original or you just shouldn't be rapping or you shouldn't be singing. Because if you were too much like someone else, well, why should they sign you when they already have James Brown? Why should they sign you where they already have NWA? Why should they sign you when they already have Kendrick Lamar, right? Or J. Cole? I'm looking at you, Logic. Uh, but nowadays, it doesn't matter because it's not about you individually. It's about the formula. It's about you doing the things that the audience tends to like. Therefore, you're disposable. And if you just say like, hip hop today is disposable, everybody gets sore and be like, oh yeah, I hate old hands, blah 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 blah. But it is. We've seen it happen. How many times have we seen one rapper become like the it person, and then all of a sudden you don't really hear about him no more? And I'm not talking about those that passed away. Unfortunately, they didn't get opportunity to do more with their career. But remember when Young M.A. was it? You know what I'm saying? Like, remember when Young Berg was it? I think he got a different name now. It's so many. We can go down the list. Remember when OJ the Juice Man was it? Right? Not real OJ. But you get my point. So with T-Pain, I've been a little long-winded on it, but you got to make those points. But what T-Pain had to say, it makes perfect sense. And we all see it, we know it. Those artists that make the music know it. But this is the problem. It's already too late, right? The only way you can bring originality back is if deals and fans start to look for something more, and it becomes a prerequisite for you to be unique. And once that becomes the deal, there are some current artists who lack the writing skill, who lack the mental to even survive, to be asked to do anything other than what they're doing. Like I like the baby, but in a lot of ways, he's released the same album about 3 times, 4 times in a row. He just has. And what was dope about him was he was a little different, right? But he's still somewhat of a one-trick pony also. And all it takes is for somebody to basically do what he does in a way he does it, and then you got another trend. So we knew this, we know this, but as a fan, if you are tired of it, support the artists and the music that you know is dope to you and that you believe needs that kind of backing with it. We don't have a lot of stories this week, so we're just going to be a little long-winded. Um, Versus, you know how that goes. Versus, we watched all of them, have announced that the Locks and Dipset are going to face off in August for a versus in Madison Square Garden. Yes, I flirted with the idea of going, but I don't really watch versus anyway, so I won't be there. But, but we like to size them up, right? The competition. Now, when verses first came around, I'm not even gonna lie, man. I was one of those people who literally took it as a versus, right? Like, yo, this is what it is. It's your catalog versus their catalog, the end. And it was kind of that for a minute, but versus as a format, as a showcase, has evolved. You know what I'm saying? Since then, to be like a celebration of music. You still got the 20 songs. It's still a quote unquote verses, but it's more of a celebration of the two artists or the two groups or whatever it may be. And one, like, let me give one example. Like when Jadakiss and Fabulous did their verses, I mean, me off the rip, thinking of it in the battle sense, like, oh, well, Fabulous wins because Fabulous has way more hits as a solo artist than Jadakiss has as a solo artist. But then they begin to expand it to the celebration of music, right? To incorporate not only your solo work, but your features. And in some cases, stuff you wrote. So then that kind of evened the scale between Jadakiss and Fabulous because it was no longer about just solo music. You can add any hits you ever touched. You know what I'm saying? Whether you was on an R&B record or what. Um, and it's and it's still good this way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a battle. But when we see verses, the first thing we instantly think about is who actually has the 20 joints. And when it comes down to Dipset and the Locks, there is definitely 20 joints. If we going by that formula of features and solo careers and group songs, the Locks and Dipset have 20 songs apiece, easy. But if I had to pick who would win, I'd have to go with Dipset. Now, hear me out, right? It's tough to say because once the Locks play the Benjamins, I'm like, oh. But then once Dipset plays Dipset Anthem, I'm like, hmm. And then when you start playing solos, right? Kiss got some joints, but Cameron can take all three Locks in a verses by himself with his career. Now, Cameron might not be the cup of tea of everybody, but this versus battle is never about which group is nicer. We know the Locks wipe the floor with the entire Dipset when it comes to bars, including Cam. That's just a fact. But when it comes to hits and impact, well, Dipset's impact is way bigger. Now, honestly, I don't even like this versus because it doesn't make sense for the Locks or Dipset. Because at the time that Dipset on the mixtape scene, right? Volume 1, volume 2, 3, the rival crew who was doing the same thing on the mixtape side was G Unit. Look it up. It was around the same exact time. That's the verses. And that ain't an easy win for Dipset. It might not be a win at all because 50 and Cam might as well have just done a versus and then brought the crews in. But we know it's not going to happen because supposedly Lloyd Banks ain't talking to 50. It's too much drama. But nevertheless, it sounds like it'll be something dope. I'm intrigued by it. I feel like I might watch just to see what they do, or I might not. But nevertheless, who do you think would win a versus 20 songs features, solos, group songs, Dipset versus the LOX. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Also, speaking of verses, Scarface appeared on Drink Champs and said that the only rapper he would do a verses with is Ice Cube. I'm gonna tell you like this. I would watch that one. That is just that's way too perfect to not happen. That's like a it has to happen type thing. You know what I'm saying? It just does because I was trying to think before. I was like, who could do a verses with Ice Cube? Because that's a tough one. Ice Cube got some legendary songs. And again, if you're talking about the format of verses, and so you're talking about not only Ice Cube's catalog, which he got 20 songs easy, but also NWA Ice Cube, right? Definitely talking about that. You're talking about other songs he was featured on, right? Songs he did with Dr. Dre after NWA. You're talking about a lot of heat, but the same could be said for Scarface. Scarface, 20 songs as a soloist, easy work. Scarface with Ghetto Boys. Scarface collaborating with different artists. Songs like My Block. It would be, you want to talk about a celebration of music and really getting a perfect picture of the scope of their careers and their impact on the hip hop game. That would be a dope battle that I honestly would feel like I have to watch, to be honest, because it's just really dope. Now, Scarface had a catch. Like, and this is on hiphopdx.com. Scarface wants Ice Cube in verses, but with a catch. Let's see if we can find what the catch is. I'll play all my favorite Cube-ish. He'll play all his favorite Face-ish. I'll beat him with that. Man, Face, we don't want. Okay, I get it. It's cute, but that's not what we want. Because I don't want Ice Cube to pick records that we don't want to hear from Face. And I don't want Scarface to pick some deep cut from Ice Cube that only he like to say, yeah, this one. You know what I'm saying? Apple Trees got bullet wounds in them. And we're like, what album, Ice Cube album was that on? You know what I'm saying? Because look, man, your favorite artists sometimes, you know, that's how they could be. Let's just keep it the way it is, right? Your 20, my 20, boom, verses. Sounds dope to me. That's going to do it for me for this week on Hip Hop Now podcast. Again, it was a very slow week. And plus, you know, the passing of BIZ MARKIE is it's probably the biggest thing right now as far as the hip hop community, what people are talking about. So I was happy to be able to cover that in this week's episode. You can follow me on social media at Vegas World INC. And please know that this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you got to do is type in the words Hip Hop Now Podcast in your search bar, hit the subscribe button, and stay locked into weekly updates on news in hip hop, as well as bonus content over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.